currently, researchers are trying to figure out a way to diagnose individuals with CTE while they are still alive. Now, CTE is a chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is the condition that a lot of NFL players have been diagnosed with after they died. And in a lot of cases, they committed suicide or became increasingly violent prior to passing. And so through autopsies, it was discovered that these individuals had the condition, but there was never a way to diagnose them while they were still alive. Well, researchers have had a breakthrough, and more research needs to be done. But this new study indicates that researchers may be one step closer to being able to diagnose the disease while a patient is still alive by detecting deposits of a certain type of protein, tau protein. Now, scans performed on 14 retired NFL players while they were still alive indicated the presence of this protein. It's a type that clumps up over neural cells that have been damaged. The protein slowly spreads throughout the brain, killing brain cells, according to the Concussion Legacy Foundation. So when one of these former players died, doctors were able to determine whether the distinctive CTE pattern that resulted in his scan actually indicated the presence of the disease. So clearly more research needs to be done to kind of corroborate these findings, but it's so important to diagnose people or find a way to diagnose people while they're alive so you can then move on to solutions, treatments, or possible cure.
Because up until now, it was only after a post-mortem exam that could confirm whether they had it. But when you listen to some of the symptoms that these men are suffering from at a relatively young age, in their 50s, you think, my God, there has to be something that we can do to prevent this type of
It's horrible. And
brain wasting.
To tell you a little more about the NFL player who was the subject of this finding, he was very young. He was in his 60s when he died, but he played football for 22 years between the ages of 11 and 33. At that point, he stopped playing football. He retired, but the condition didn't really start to affect him until later in life. So the man was 59, I apologize, 59 when his brain was scanned according to the study. 2 years later, at the age of 61, the man's wife noticed that he had been experiencing progressive motor deficits, such as the inability to button his shirts, zip his pants, or tie his shoes. Yeah. It's just such a devastating.
It's horribly debilitating.
Yeah.
These NFL players now are aware of it, and it's an awful choice they have to make, right? Because they know that they say that there's a little trauma on every play. Even it's not just those horrible collisions. So this is just in relation to the NFL because, as Anna says, it happens to a lot of NFL players. So apparently there's more and more research that soccer players also show signs of it. I guess that's because of the headbutting and the use of the head in the sport. But in any case, they're faced with the question, here's the sport I love, here's the sport that I excel at, here's this thing that I love doing and I excel at it, and I'm gonna make all this money doing it. It could enable an entire life for myself and my family, and yet it may rob me of half of my life or the last 30 years of my life or even more.
Yeah. And a lot of parents now question whether or not to let their children play because, professional football players usually start at very young ages, and some parents are saying, absolutely not, I'm not gonna let my kids play football to try and spare them from these types of brain injuries because we don't know enough.
And I think what's important is that the information is now out there. Because remember, when this story broke, the NFL was trying to withhold the data, withhold the information, and then people aren't able to make an informed decision. And so making an informed decision is the first part of this, and I really do believe the second part is coming up with a proper way of diagnosing people and treatment and a cure. But this is good news, it's hopeful. Hopefully they can corroborate it and we will see some progress.
Help us build independent media together. Come join us, tytnetwork.com/join.